You know that feeling, the one that creeps in when everything seems within reach, but something inside you quietly pulls the brakes. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It whispers in the back of your mind, "Not now. You're not ready. You'll fail again." And somehow, you listen, not because you believe it, but because you're tired. Tired of trying, tired of falling, tired of hoping. This isn't weakness. This is conditioning. You were not born doubting yourself. You were taught to, by people who feared their own light, by systems that profit from your silence, by wounds you never asked for but still carry. And now here you are, in a soul with power, trapped in invisible walls built by fear, shame, and habit. But what if today something shifts? Not because of a miracle, not because of a sudden burst of confidence, but because something deeper in you is done with hiding, done with holding back, done with living beneath your own truth. Because no matter how many times you've fallen, no matter how long you've stayed stuck, there's a part of you that never gave up. It's still there, waiting, listening. And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment it starts to wake up. It always starts in silence, not in the chaos, not in the noise of failure, but in the quiet moment before the decision. That's where the sabotage lives, a hesitation, a small voice wrapped in logic, wearing the mask of caution. It says, wait. It says, maybe not this time. And you believe it, because it sounds reasonable, because it feels safe. But that voice is not your intuition, it's a program, a loop you didn't write, running on repeat in the background of your life. And it's been there for so long that now you confuse it with who you are. You don't chase your ideas because you're not disciplined. You stop halfway because you're just not motivated. You settle because maybe it's not meant for you. But beneath every excuse is a fear, not always of failure, sometimes of success, of expansion, of becoming someone you no longer recognize because you've never seen yourself fully expressed. This is the real trap. When your comfort becomes your cage, when your own voice turns against your evolution, and when surviving replaces living. But now, you're noticing. You see the pattern. You feel the resistance, not as truth but as a test. And that shift in awareness, that's the beginning of everything. Fear doesn't always come with shaking hands or racing hearts. Sometimes it shows up dressed as logic. It speaks softly, not to protect you, but to preserve the version of you that's already dying. It tells, this is enough. Why risk more? It pretends to care about your safety, but what it really fears is your transformation, because becoming who you were meant to be means letting parts of you die. The identities built on approval, the habits that gave you false control, the narratives you've whispered so long they sound like truth. Fear doesn't want you to change, not because it's evil, but because it's ancient, it's primal. It was born to keep you alive, not to see you grow. But you're not here just to survive. You are not a machine of instinct. You are awareness, consciousness, choice, and every time you choose movement over stagnation, every time you take a step without certainty, every time you speak when your voice shakes, you're not fighting fear. You're integrating it. You're saying, I see you, I honor why you exist, but you don't get to drive anymore. That's the shift. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to obey it. There's a rhythm you've been living in, a loop so familiar, you don't even notice it anymore. Wake, scroll, delay, repeat, dream, and then distract. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because you've been trained to numb instead of feel, to react instead of reflect, to keep moving so you never have to ask, is this who I really am? Autopilot is the enemy of awareness. It makes you efficient, yes, but not conscious. It lets days pass without meaning. It lets months pass without change. And before you know it, years blur into patterns you never chose, but accepted. But the moment you pause, truly pause, something cracks. Stillness invites truth, and truth doesn't shout. It waits quietly beneath the noise. That's why silence is uncomfortable, because in the silence you remember what you wanted, who you were, what you gave up, and what's still waiting for you. So interrupt the pattern, break the rhythm. Turn off the noise, not forever, just long enough to hear yourself again, because the path doesn't begin with a plan. It begins with presence. Most of what you believe about yourself was never yours to begin with. You inherited voices. Words, spoken in moments of anger, disappointment, fear, and somewhere along the way you mistook them for truth. You're not good enough. You always quit. You don't have what it takes. These weren't facts, they were projections, but repetition gave them weight. And now they echo in your mind as if they belong there, but they don't. You are not the voice that doubts. You are the one who hears it. And because you can hear it, you can change it. Not by force, not by shouting affirmations in a mirror, but by choosing new language, quietly, deliberately. Language that doesn't flatter, but frees. Words that don't try to impress but express who you are becoming. Not I am perfect, but I am willing to grow. Not I have no fear, but I will not bow to it. You are not building a new identity from scratch. You're peeling back the one that was placed on you, layer by layer, story by story, until all that's left is the truth that never needed to be proven. You were never broken. Just buried. Change doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't explode into your life like a lightning strike. It whispers. It knocks quietly. And most days, it looks like nothing. Just a breath before you react. Just a pause before you say yes to what you used to avoid. Just a single promise kept unto yourself. You think you need a breakthrough, but what you really need is to stop breaking your own word. You've been waiting for motivation, waiting for the perfect moment, but growth doesn't wait, and neither should you. Start small, not because small is safe, but because it's honest. Waking up when you said you would, finishing what you said you'd finish. Choosing discomfort over the easy way out, not once but every day, and when you fail, and because you will, then must start again, gently, without shame, without stories. Discipline is not punishment. It's devotion. It's the way you prove through action that your future matters more than your fear. Every time you show up for yourself, the old self, the one built on avoidance and delay, loses its grip, and something else begins to rise, not louder, but steadier, clearer, more true. The voice inside you won't disappear overnight. The patterns won't dissolve in a single sunrise. But something is different now. You're aware. You're watching. You're no longer asleep in your own story. And that changes everything. Because once you see the chains, you can no longer pretend they're jewelry. Once you hear the lie, you can't keep calling it your truth. Once you taste freedom, even for a moment, nothing less will satisfy. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to what you were before the fear, before the noise, before the world taught you to doubt yourself. You won't get it right every day, but every day you'll get closer. Closer to clarity, closer to courage, closer to the version of you that doesn't need saving, only space to breathe. And if that part of you is awake now, don't let it fall back asleep. Let this be the beginning of listening deeper, of acting sooner, of trusting quieter. If this message touched something real in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, live it, and return to it whenever the old voice comes calling, because here in this space, you are no longer the enemy, you are the author, and your story is just beginning.